Hello everyone, this is Marc Sabatella from Outside Shore Music, and welcome to the MuseScore Café. This is my regular series we do Wednesdays, and we talk about some aspect of creating music using MuseScore. This week's session is going to be the score of the month, which is something I've been doing the third Wednesday, and it seems to work out well, where I just take a piece of actual music and enter it into MuseScore, as far as we get. Sometimes we only get a few measures in, but the point is that in the course of doing that, we get to look at all sorts of real-world problems, things that maybe don't show up if I say, today I'm just going to talk about slurs or whatever, and then there's some aspect of slurs that we don't get to look at because we haven't seen it in practice. So that's what we're going to be doing today, and because we're, deep into the counterpoint course, in the community here, and we're doing two-voice counterpoint specifically, or two-part counterpoint, I'm going to be entering a piece of music that I've used as examples in several of the lessons, and pardon my pronunciation, because as I have stated many times, I'm just not, I just don't know my Latin pronunciation, but I'll say oculus non vidit, or something sort of to that effect. So this is the piece we are going to be entering. I have put it in the chat, so a link to it in the chat. So if you want to look ahead and see, well, gee, is there something going on in that piece that that you're curious about, then we can make sure we cover it. Like, for instance, one thing I know is at the very end we're going to have a full brev here, a note that's also known as a double whole note. So if I remember, we're going to look at how to do that. Oculus. So O, like a short O sound like that, oculus. That's how I'm interpreting that. There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of get started. I'm going to create the score, talk about how I set it up, and then we're just going to go a little bit from the beginning, skip over to the end because that's that interesting part. And if you all have questions about anything in this score, we'll deal with them. So what I see here is that it is a score for two voices. And I know they're voices, of course, because there's lyrics, right? So it's a score for two voices, and they're labeled in the Latin, cantus and altus, and that's Latin again, but I can tell by the ranges that this is basically a soprano voice, right? It's going up to, it's got some high notes in there. So I'm just going to call this soprano and alto as far as creating my score. So let's hop over to MuseScore. Hello, where'd MuseScore go? There it is. And I'm going to say that I want to create a new score. And I'm going to go ahead and say choose instruments here, and I'll come to vocals, and I'll say I want a soprano and an alto. And I am going to go ahead, as I often, you've seen me do these demos before, I often just hit done and never make it to the second screen, but the second screen is quite useful if you're going to try to do anything unusual, time signatures or pickups or anything like that. So I've got the PDF of my score. Sorry if I'm making you dizzy flipping around, but what I want to do is get this guy to kind of float on top so I can be looking at it while I'm doing other things. And that's something that has come up here. I found that this is a feature of my Chromebook, where it has a feature where when you hover over the maximize button there, you see this menu giving you these different options, and float is one of them. That's a cool Chromebook feature. I'm told macOS has a keyboard shortcut to do that, and I'm pretty sure there's a way to do that on Windows and probably most Linux window managers, but you might have to discuss amongst yourselves how to do that, because I don't know how to do it on other systems. So I'm going to go ahead and look at what's going on here. Let me just take a quick look again at the chat, also make sure I didn't miss something particularly important, but I'll get the chat back in a moment. So what I see here is that there is no key signature, so the key signature I can leave alone. Now, I do want to mention something about key signatures in MuseScore, because this is a thing. When I click C major, you'll see I have options of C of the major keys, or I can click the minor tab, and now I see the minor keys. Well, they're the same key signatures, right? C major, A minor. There is no difference in MuseScore whether you enter your key signature as C major or A minor. And the only thing that happens is there's a little notation made in the score, so when you export it to Music XML, it will record whether it was C major or A minor. But it doesn't affect anything in MuseScore. In theory, it could affect default spelling of accidentals. In practice, it doesn't. I mention this because neither of these is accurate. This is neither in C major nor in A minor. It's modal, right? And so it's kind of the last cadence is a D Dorian cadence. So whatever. I'm just going to call it C. Well, I'll just go ahead and call it A minor because what the heck, I never do that. Time signature is not 4/2 though. I mean, it's not 4/4. It is 4/2. So I'm going to pop up the time signature thing and make sure I switch over to 4/2. And tempo, I was afraid of that. I mess up clicking and I mess up the size of my window. Tempo, I don't know what tempo I'm going to want, so I'm just going to leave that alone for now. I'll go ahead, though, and at least check the box to say, yes, I want the tempo marking to appear, because that makes it really easy to edit later. I have no idea how long this thing is, but I can look, right? I can zoom in on this guy or just take a look at the last measure, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. Wow, it's 31 measures. It's almost but not quite 32. That's interesting. So I can come in here and say I only want 31 measures. Now I can come over to my title and Oculus non vidit. Composer Orlando. And so he goes by a couple different spellings of his name. I'm going to go the way it is here, de Lasos. So I'm going to put that in, Orlando de Lasos. And subtitle, I'm going to make sure I clear that box. I'm not going to enter a lyricist. It's basically Bible verses, and it's public domain, so I don't need to enter copyright. Now I can hit done, and now I am going to shrink down this thing so I can see my chat again. There we go. Okay. So, I now have my score started. And the first thing you're going to notice about this is it's interesting that that Wednesdays you're having trouble, Allison. I can't imagine what might be going on that would make one day of the week different than others, unless it's just something about the local traffic in your area where other things are going on and you've got a shared thing. But anyhow, I'm sorry that that there's issues that some people have. So I've got a soprano and an alto. The thing that I notice right away that's a little odd looking about this is these rests, right? Because we're in 4/2. The convention, at least in MuseScore, is while measure rests are used in every other time signature, in other words, any other measure, let me flip over to my MuseScore Café theme. Whenever there's an empty measure, you see this thing that we colloquially call a whole rest, but it's not a whole rest. When you see this thing hanging from the staff line, but it's centered, it's not a whole rest, it's a measure rest. The distinction is a whole rest is the same length as a whole note, 4 beats of 4/4 time. A measure rest takes up the whole measure, however long that measure is. So a measure rest, a centered, it looks like a whole rest, but it's centered in the measure. A whole rest would be actually where, it would fall in its natural beat position. A measure rest looks like a whole rest, but it's centered, and that can take up the full measure in any time signature. So 3/4, you use this also. 2/4, you use that also. However, 5/4, you use that. MuseScore does decide, and this is a fairly common convention, that if you're going to have a fully empty measure in a time signature that actually can take a full brev rest or a full double whole note rest, it shows that instead. So that is why what you're looking at here looks a little funny if you haven't worked in 4/2 before. This is a double whole note rest. So it's still the full measure rest. It's still centered, but it's displayed using the brev symbol, and that's fairly common, not necessarily universal. All right, so since we're talking about brevs, let's go ahead and enter that last note because we know we're going to need it, right? So I'm going to click that top staff, press N for note entry mode, and you'll notice that on my toolbar right now, I don't see the brev. I don't see the whole double whole note. If you want it there, I mentioned this in the tip of the week, like last week, I think, or maybe it was this week, I don't remember. If I go to the add button here, oh, no, sorry, not the add button, the customize button, you'll see that I can enable the double whole note right here. And now I've got myself a double whole note on the toolbar. So you can do that. But you can also just use keyboard shortcuts. I always talk about 4, 5, 6 being eighth, quarter, half. 7 is therefore whole note. It's the next longer value. 8 is double whole note. So if I type 8 and then type my D, I get my double whole note. And let me turn my volume back up. So that is that. The bottom staff, I'm pretty sure is a D, so I'm going to go down to the bottom staff, and on my keyboard, it's customized to be left bracket, but normally it's Alt down. My computer reserves Alt down for something operating system specific, so I customized it to be to be left bracket. So left bracket for me moves down to the bottom staff, and now I can type my D there. Now this isn't the right D. I know it's D an octave lower, so Control down moves it down an octave lower. And I'm going to open up the mixer right now because the sounds that it's giving me is choir sounds using Muse sounds, and they're very quiet. And I don't know why. No one likes that fact, but I'm just going to crank those suckers all the way up because for choir, that seems to be, if you want to use Muse sounds choir, that seems to be the trick to making it balance better. F10 is the shortcut to open and close the mixer. So I press F10, now it's closed again. So now I want to actually come back to the score and pin it again. It says it's floating. That's weird, but then it's not floating. Okay, well now it is. Okay, good. I guess I minimized it. That was the deal. So now that it's floating, I can see the music and I can go to the last measure and make sure I actually got that right. I did. So that's how you got those things in there. I used 8 as the shortcut. So now we're going to come back to the beginning and get some of the beginning stuff in there. So since I mentioned about the staff names being Cantus and Altus, or Altus, I might as well change those so they look like that. Notice that the full staff name says Cantus and Altus, but the after that, the rest of the staves don't have anything. That's pretty common for small ensemble scores. You'll label the first system, and then after that, expect that people can figure out which what staff is what. In a large score, like a symphony score, an orchestra score, it's more common to have like an abbreviated instrument name on subsequent systems, and that's what MuseScore does by default. And so that's why you're seeing an S and an A. Well, I don't want the S and the A, so I'm just going to select that S and press delete. Select that A, press delete. And MuseScore knows, notice the soprano and alto, the full names are still there on the first system, but the other staves don't have anything. When I deleted that S, it deleted it from everything but the first staff. And I can see I accidentally entered a note there, so I'm going to select that measure and hit delete. So I still want to edit these names. So I'm going to double-click soprano, and it pops up the staff properties dialog. And now I can select that and change it to Cantus. And I'm going to show you a little trick here. If you want to change multiple staff names, there is this down arrow button in the staff properties dialog. If I click this, ideally, it would just move to the bottom staff and you'll see Cantus take effect. But the reality is, if I try that right now, you'll see it moves down to the bottom staff, but the top staff didn't change, right? So I'm going to go back up to the top staff. I'm going to change it again, Cantus, and this time I got to hit apply. If you want to use these up and down arrows, you got to hit apply. every time. That's just the way it is. I don't like it, but it's how it is. Hit apply, and now you'll see the score is updated to say cantus. And now I can hit the down arrow, change alto to say altus. And if you're not going to use the up and down arrows, you don't have to hit apply. OK always does an automatic apply. I mean, every program. So there you go. Cantus, altus. So that's that. Now, the next thing that we see here is this doohickey. This symbol here showing two notes. And this is a common feature of vocal scores, especially in the Renaissance when ranges weren't necessarily so standardized, but you'll see some indication of that in modern vocal scores as well. But it often takes a different form. This is the form that the particular early music specialist who implemented this feature wanted it to take. It could have taken other form, but this is how his, he was Italian, and this is the way some particular Italian edition of Renaissance music presented these. They're called ambitus. That means the range of the notes. And so MuseScore has a special symbol to enter those, and it's a little weird. By the way, I'm seeing all the comments here about the stuff going on in what's going on with the stream and all, and great. But if I'm missing anything, if I missed any important questions or anything, be sure to let me know. I haven't seen anything. So this ambitus symbol, it's a little funny how you enter it, but I'm going to show you. You're going to click the clef. It's going to get attached to the clef. And now I'm going to come over to the palettes here. And in the palettes, I want the pitch palette, I think. Yes. It might also be in the lines palette, but in the pitch palette, you'll see that symbol. And when I click it, I have no idea what's going to happen right now because there's no notes. I'm a little afraid it might just crash, to be honest. Let's find out. Yeah, it just enters some silly little note. What normally will happen, though, is whatever notes you've already entered on the staff, it will automatically calculate the highest note and the lowest note and display this accordingly. Right? Oh, yeah, that is. There's not no notes. D is both the highest note and the lowest note. So that's actually accurate. And now I can do the same for the altus staff. Select the clef, click the ambitus symbol, and that enters. Now, as I enter other notes into the staff here, you would like this ambitus to update, but it won't update automatically when as soon as I enter the notes. What'll have to happen is I will have to remember to come back, select that ambitus, come over to the properties panel, and click this button that says update to match the notes on the staff. Then it will automatically update. All right. So I am going to come in here and enter these notes now. So I selected the measure, pressed N for note input mode, and now that is a dotted whole note. So 7 for whole note, and then dot. And at some point, my thing that displays my keystrokes always decides to stop working. Never figured out why, but that's the way it is. So I'm just narrating what I'm doing. I type 7, then dot, and then I can type an E. And there's my E. And I'm going to enter, I think, that first line of lyric, oculus non vidit. I'm going to enter those notes and then pause. So 6 for half note, D, C, A, and now a dotted half note. Half note is already selected, so all I got to do is click dot, and then C, and then 5 for quarter, D, 7 for E, and then A. I knew I wanted low A, but I got a high A. It's a very screamy high A. That's a high note. So again, I'm going to use control down. The algorithm in MuseScore is always going to be when you type a letter name, it's going to choose the closest one. And A above that E was closer than A below the E. So it chose the A above by default, and so control down or command down on a Mac changes the octave. So I've entered that much. I'm now going to leave note input mode by pressing escape. And the reason why I'm doing that, well, first of all, I often do music in little chunks and then leave note input mode and then reevaluate to maybe enter lyrics or something else. I am going to enter lyrics here, and then I'm going to talk about a little bit more about what I'm doing here. So I'll select that first note, Control L, is how I can enter lyrics. And actually, let me close this version of the chat and see the real chat down here, so that was a popped out chat. This one will show me graphics faster. I'm going to enter the lyrics now. So Control L, after I select, let me do that again. Select the first note, and then Control L or Command L on Mac. Yeah, and I'm sorry if the whatever is going on is causing some people to have choppy internet. Unfortunately, that's just the way it is. You might have to watch the video later to get more. But what I will say is it's not necessarily your own personal internet connection that causes issues. Remember, the internet works by having hops, right? So I'm communicating with a data center somewhere in Denver probably, and then Denver is communicating with one probably in, I don't know, New York or something, and then New York one is communicating with one, somewhere maybe in England, but who knows, right? But there's all these different hops, and anywhere along the way there could be glitches. And then of course, there's just, in order for the data stream to get from me to you, it's a lot more than just your own internet speed. That's all I can tell you about that. I'm not an expert on that kind of stuff, but all I can do is say it's if everyone isn't seeing the same problem, it means it's not my internet connection that's the problem, and so therefore there's nothing I can do about it except advise. So one more time, select note, Control L or Command L, and now I'm going to type the capital O and then a hyphen and then Q hyphen loose space known space. Now notice VD is a melisma, right? The same syllable stretched over several notes. So I'll type the V, and then I'll type as many hyphens as I need. One to get me to the D, one to get me to the E, and one to get me to the A, and then I can type DEET, comma, and then escape to leave there. So I've entered the first phrase now, melody and lyrics. And the reason I'm doing this one phrase at a time, as I've mentioned, I often work that way anyhow, but it's especially useful here because of what I know about this piece. This piece uses imitative counterpoint very heavily. So very often when I see a phrase in one voice, it's about to be imitated in the other voice, either at the same pitch or maybe an octave lower, maybe a fifth lower, maybe a fifth higher. Could be a lot of different things. In this case, you can see it's the same melody, the same lyric, same everything, but starting on A instead of E. So it's starting a fifth lower. So I'm going to copy this, paste it down there, and then adjust the pitch. So we'll get to see that happen. So I'll select the first measure by clicking it, shift click the last measure of that phrase, then Control C to copy. Now on the bottom staff, I'll go down to that second measure. I want to get that whole rest in there. Actually, I can do that without literally going into node input mode exactly. I can just select that measure rest, and I want to turn it into a whole rest. Remember earlier I said there's a distinction between a whole rest and a measure rest? That is a whole rest. It takes exactly the same length as a whole note. And so it takes two of them to fill a measure in 4/2 time. Normally you would just use the measure rest, but this shows you the difference. The whole rest is lined up. This whole rest happens the same time as that C. This whole rest happens the same time as that C. So whole rests and measure rests look the same but are positioned differently. So I'm now going to select that second rest, press N for node input mode. No, I don't want to go to node input mode. I want to copy and paste. Did I already copy that line? I believe I did. So all I need to do then is select that rest. It's selected, and Control V should paste it. So there you go. I now have another copy of that line in there. And notice it did what it needed to do in terms of the ties, right? This E was a dotted whole note originally, but on the bottom staff, it gets turned into a tie. So I'm going to come back to your question in a second, Paul, but basically it happens automatically. I will show you that in a moment. But while it is still selected, I want to fix the pitch. And I did also, so I've made a point of my tip of the week in the newsletter. The tip of the week is where possible, I'm trying to make it be something that relates to what we're working on in the counterpoint course. And I know diatonic transposition is something that we're going to be using a lot, including here. By diatonic transposition, I mean I want to take that thing and move it down a fifth, but it's not necessarily always a perfect fifth. In this case, I think it happens to be, but I want it to be a diatonic fifth. In other words, I don't want it to calculate, oh, I have to preserve that minor third there, and by adding an accidental. I don't want accidentals in this transposition. I just want it to move the notes down. So there's a shortcut for that, and it's Shift, Alt, down arrow. And that moves it down one step, Shift down again, Shift, Alt, down again, Shift, Alt, down again, Shift, Alt, down again, and now it's there. So, I'm now going to press Escape, and I just now am going to get to Paul's question about the rest. When I select that rest and press 7, it changes it to a whole rest, and then MuseScore knows what it needs to do to fill that rest, to fill that measure up. I'm going to undo that. This time I'm going to press 5 to change it to a quarter rest. Notice it changed to a quarter rest, but MuseScore knows what it needs to do to fill out the rest of the measure. So when you make changes to durations, MuseScore does what it needs to do to make sure the measure has the correct length. Always does that automatically. There's times when you sort of wish it didn't, but it's always the case that just if you enter stuff left to right, it's going to be good. So whether or not it gave me that second rest, I knew I was about to enter an A anyhow. So whether it had that rest there or not wouldn't have made a lick of difference. All right, so I now have that line in there. Let's go ahead and get the next phrase. So the next phrase starts in that fourth measure there. I'll go to note input mode by pressing N, and this time it starts with a half rest. So 6, 0 is the shortcut for a rest. I haven't had to enter a rest yet, but 0 is the shortcut to enter a rest. And now a whole bunch of quarter notes. So press 5 for quarter note, and then A, B, C, D, E, C, and then 6 for half note, F, and then 5 for D, E, F, D, and then 6 for half note, F, and I'm pretty sure the next note is an E. I think I'm just going to keep entering notes while I'm at it here. So 7, E, A, and then 6 dot A, 5, B, C, B, C, D. Oh, here's another brev. 8, E, and then 7 for the whole note. E, and now I'll press Escape and leave. So, one of the things that I've noticed here is, well, I guess this isn't too surprising because MuseScore is what produced this score, but it ended the system at the same place, right? It's the original version had 5 measures. This version has 5 measures. And it worked out that way because it's the same program that did it both times. This original version was one I did myself in MuseScore many years ago. But sometimes what I find is, when you're entering the music, it might come out a little different. And typically, I don't worry about that until I'm done. However, I do like to sometimes put in some line breaks so that as I'm entering the music, I don't lose my bearings. I want, as I'm entering this measure here, I want it to be the same place. It's the second measure of the second system. I want it to still look like the second measure of the second system. So sometimes I go through and pre-populate some line breaks to make my job easier. It looks like I want 5 measures on that next system. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll select the measure and hit enter. The next system wants to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 measures. So I will go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, select that measure, and hit enter. The next system has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 again. This is not an exact science. I mean, it's exact, but it's like, you just have to count. It looks like another 5, oh, it's hidden behind here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then the last system is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the sixth measure that's hanging off the end. And that's, maybe I miscounted. Might have miscounted somewhere. Did I miscount? 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. Oh, that's only 5, so I'm good. So I've got my line breaks in there. Okay, so let's see. Frank's question is about, data servers and stuff like that. Yeah. Place your company's business proxy. I have absolutely no idea what you mean about proxy data servers. I'm not an IT guy, unfortunately. So someone else might be able to help Frank out, but I really don't actually know what you're talking about. I don't know those. I know those words, but I don't know how to use them in a sentence, much less answer questions about them. All right, so I'm going to come back to the original here, and I want to see again. Well, first of all, let's get those lyrics in there. This time there's a melisma, and I want to talk about the difference in the melisma. Remember, there was a melisma. By melisma is that that V keep holding out one syllable over several notes. That's the definition of melisma. When the word is multiple syllables, you do it with a hyphen, just, because you always hyphenate multiple syllable words. So you just use a hyphen to indicate a melisma. But if you have a one-syllable word, then you're not going to use a hyphen for a melisma. Use an underscore, and then it's going to draw a line like this. And this isn't just a MuseScoreism. That's just how music notation works. When you have multiple syllable words, you use hyphens to indicate melisma. But if you have a one-syllable word or the last syllable of a multiple syllable word, we're going to use that underscore. We're going to use that line at the bottom. So I'm going to click my A here. Excuse me. And I'll zoom in a little bit. Control L and neck. That seems so awkward of a word to say, but neck. And then I'm going to press underscore once for every note that I need it to carry through. So to the B, to the C, to the D, to the E, to the C, to the F, and then to the D. And now I can type that syllable, A-U. And this is another melisma, but this time it's with a hyphen. So let me zoom out a little bit. By the way, I'm using Control two-finger swipe for zooming in and out. That's my normal way of zooming. So press hyphen, 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 and how far does that melisma go? It goes just to the next E. So hyphen one more time. Now I'm on the E. I type ris, and then space, AU, hyphen, DI. Here comes another melisma. Hyphen, 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 and then veet. Nope, no, not even the veet yet. Another hyphen. It's two E's, and the veet comes in on the second one. Now notice what MuseScore is doing here. I'm going to hit escape. Notice that MuseScore, when there was a melisma that was relatively short, it only put in a single hyphen there. When the melisma got really long, it said, you know what, one hyphen isn't going to be enough. I'm going to put in multiple hyphens. That's something it does automatically, and the algorithm is designed to do reasonable things. Okay, so it tries to decide how many hyphens to put in so that it doesn't get too cluttered but isn't too confusing because you get too much space before you see a hyphen. But because this comes up a lot in Renaissance music, we're going to be dealing, a fair amount with Renaissance music in the counterpoint course, not exclusively, but a fair amount. And melismas are just huge, huge, huge in this type of piece. You're going to have these long melismas like that. You're going to have cases like this where the hyphens are spread, and you might want to know how you can customize how that works. So I'm going to show you. We're going to go to Format, Style, and then in the Style dialog, I'm just going to minimize that for a second. Lyrics. You'll see options here now for Which one do I want? Max dash distance. This is saying 16 right? SP is for, well, it's another Latin term actually, spadium, but it's spaces, staff spaces. The distance between two staff lines, in other words, a staff space, that is the basic unit of measurement in any music notation program. So any notation program uses staff spaces as the basic unit of measurement because that's the traditional way music is done. So 16 spaces is how far it's allowing these dashes to be. If you decide you don't want your dashes that far apart, then all I got to do is turn down that number. So if I start cranking it down, you'll see now that the dashes are closer together. So that is a way that, and it will always automatically kind of make them equal distant to each other and equal distant to the syllable. So it's not saying you want your dashes exactly 10 spaces. You're saying you want it no more than 10 spaces. And then it will add another dash as necessary and then shuffle things around. So it does all this stuff automatically. You just have to put in a number. But I have no problem with the default, so I'm just going to reset that. Now, I do see a question here about Shelley talking about gallery view, and I'm not totally positive what you mean, but if you mean the stream itself, the stream is not, it's not like the office hours. Office hours is like a Zoom meeting where everyone's on screen and we're all talking to each other. These MuseScore Café and Music Masterclass is me presenting, and you all are there in the chat, but not everyone's on screen at all. And there are situations, and every once in a while I will invite someone as a guest speaker to come up, and I can do that. But this is how this works. So this pop-out, maybe you're talking about then the chat. The chat, let's show you that. The chat is, here's the main window then. This is more or less what you're seeing, except it looks different. This button down here, that's the chat button. I close the chat. I now open the chat again. So that's the chat button. So that's, I guess, what you're talking about. All right. So I now have that music entered for that phrase. And if I still have misunderstood, feel free to clarify further, and I can try to figure it out. So I guess I still don't know what you mean about little pop-out box where I'm editing. Do you mean the score here? The fact that I'm looking at a PDF file? This is just a separate program. This is my PDF viewer. This is just my PDF viewer that I'm viewing. So whatever PDF viewer you have on your system, I'm looking at it. I did mention at the beginning that on my system, on a Chromebook, you can hover over the maximize button, and there's these different options that control different aspects of it, and I have it set to float, meaning it stays open even while I'm using MuseScore. This window stays on top. That's a Chromebook feature, but macOS has a similar feature. Most Linux window managers have a similar feature, and I'm pretty sure there's a way on Windows, and so hopefully someone on Windows can help you figure that out. All right, so what I'm interested in now is, I said this piece was imitative, but I don't know, like that. Remember that first phrase imitated a fifth below? Look at the next phrase. The next phrase starts with A, B, C. Well, the imitation also is A, B, C. So it's actually, the imitation changes at that point to be an octave different. And this is why I'm doing this in little sections, because I know that this piece, it isn't like the entire piece it's not a full canon, in other words. Canon is something we'll learn about more coming up in a few more weeks in the counterpoint course, but that's like a technique where the imitation is exact throughout either the entire piece or at least a huge section of a piece. So this piece isn't that. It's like little chunks of the piece are imitation, but then you'll see the imitation gets broken all over the place. So that first phrase was imitated at the fifth. The next phrase is imitated at the octave. So I'm going to go ahead and select that phrase, select the whole phrase here, Control C to copy, and now I can see I need to enter it after a half rest on the bottom staff. So on the bottom staff right now it's a whole rest. I'll type 6 to change it to a half rest, And then MuseScore again fills out the measure, so I can select that other rest, press Control V. Ooh, when I did the copy, I included the rest. That's okay. I'll just paste it here. So I'll select here and Control V. Now it no longer fits. Check that out. It no longer fits. So I'm going to have to make a little adjustment. That's fine. I'll show you how to do that. But it is now there, and I will take it down an octave with Control down. And so now I've got my imitation. I know it doesn't stay exactly that. I'm going to have to make other adjustments. But let me go ahead and see if I can address the side, how this is all fitting. Normally, if you are trying to fit, like when I entered those notes, it just couldn't quite fit measure 5 onto that system anymore. And probably it's because in my original version I had changed to a slightly smaller staff size, or I was using a different lyric font, not really sure exactly what's different. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just reduce the staff size a little bit. I find that is the simplest, most effective way to get more stuff to fit. There are other options. There's just other options, but I'm going to do that. So I'm going to go to Format, Page Settings, and instead, actually what I might have done was change the margins, actually. But instead of 7.5, I'm going to go with 7.4, and that was already enough to make it work. So press OK, and now I'm good again. So Stephen mentions a Power Toys thing, which, that is kind of what I thought. So Microsoft Power Toys is provided by Microsoft, so it's sort of part of Windows, but it doesn't come by default. It's something you have to install separately. So I didn't know if Windows 11 had finally decided to include something by default. But it's not like a third-party program that you have to download from some untrusted source. I mean, it's an official Microsoft program. It's just for whatever reason not shipped with Windows. And they sort of don't really say they support it, but it's been around forever, and they keep improving it. So 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 I've now gotten that music to fit, and now I want to investigate. Like I did that copy and paste, knowing that it's imitative, but I know it's not exact imitation. So I'm now going to compare a little bit. So it's neck, neck, neck. And at this point is where the imitation stopped, right? Everything was perfect until this point when it's not the same anymore. So I'm just going to delete from here to here. I click that note, shift click that note, and delete it because the imitation isn't exact at that point. And I'm now going to enter this now. Let's see, I want to get that syllable. I need to enter these notes here. So I'm going to start here, and now I'm just going to enter those notes. So, note input mode, 6, E, and then 5, down. So control down for that. Hey, my thing came back. I wonder, it just has a mind of its own as far as displaying my keystrokes. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then half note. A, whoops. What did I do wrong here? Oh, the G is a half note. Let me undo that. 6, G, and then A, and then 5, T to tie to a quarter note across the bar line. And now 4 for eighth note, plus for sharp, G, plus for sharp again, F, 6 for the G, 7 for the A. So, and once again, it looks like, it's not going to quite fit everything that needs to be on that staff, on that system, so I'm going to have to reduce my staff size a little more to fit it. So I'm going to do that in a minute. But let's just do that first. I'm just going to come down to back to Format, Page Settings, and just reduce the staff size a little more. I'm silly and like round numbers, so 7.5 was the original, but if I went to 7.25, that's like an eighth. It's somehow is that yeah whatever. It just feels good to me. So I'm going to go with 725, halfway between 1.75 and 1.7 is how I'm looking at that. And gee, that still wasn't enough to fit another measure. So whatever. I'm just going to go down more. Let's go back to page settings and just call it 1.7. I can just hit apply if I want to check what it looks like. You see that it says apply to all parts. That would also apply it to all your parts if you had parts. But you can also just click in another box and it will apply the settings right away. Wow, that's still not enough to fit another measure. So let's just go down to 1.65. All right, that's fit another measure. I could just go down crazy small and then increase later. You play this how you want. But I've got that in. Let's get the lyrics now. Starting on that E, Control L, Reese, space, O, and then dash, 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 dash until I get to the A, D, dash, 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 dash until I get to the Vit, comma. I'm going to hit save because I haven't saved this dang thing yet. Let's put it in here. And I'm going to call it, I should have a cafe folder in here, but I don't yet because I'm still in the process of rearranging and getting things organized after my big switch over to Outside Shore Music. So I got that music in there, and I want to point out something musically because we are here. And I'm looking at something in the score that I want to talk about musically, and we can talk about it again in masterclass, but since we're looking right at it, I'm going to talk about it, a counterpoint thing. This particular cadence is a little funny in that both voices didn't come to the A. That's not like unheard of. If you've been doing the species counterpoint exercises, we talk about always having your cadence being the tonic in both voices. It's hardly required that both voices would have to come to the tonic. But in this case, we have the leading tone to tonic, the G sharp to A in the bottom voice, but the top voice isn't going B to A. It's just going E to E, and that's fine. Scale degree 5 is the other note that typically occurs in cadences. So I'm just pointing out that exists. The other thing that I want to point out is that there is this kind of fourth species kind of effect of a note tied across the bar line to create some tension, to create some syncopation. If you look at this, you'll see E to A is not, there's no true suspension, or some people would call it a consonant suspension, because that A underneath the E isn't dissonant, but it still creates that effect of the A coming in and then being sustained while the other voice changes and then moving by step. The A moves by step. It also doesn't just go down to G sharp and back, but it does this little ornamental figure, which is super common. Instead of just going 1 7 1, you'll often see 1 7 6 7 1. Can I say sev? I know some people who say sev. I could say, I could use solfege syllables, but that gets complicated when you're dealing with modes that keep changing. So I'm just going to say 1 sev. 1 sev 6 sev 1. That type of line is super, super common. So you could get used to seeing that. It's just a little neighbor tone below the G sharp. Anyhow, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to listen to this thing, and then because we're I'm making good progress on this thing, and I don't know that we're going to see anything new. I think I've entered every little thing that we're going to need in this score. We've seen accidentals, we've seen the brevs, we've seen melismas, we've seen rests. I don't know that we're going to encounter anything new, but although you all can look ahead, I posted the link, and if you see something that in the score that says, oh, how would you do that thing in measure, 17, I can take a look. But what I do want to do is listen to the playback and talk about that. I'm also, before I even do that, I'm going to select this ambatus symbol and click the update so you can just see it update. Whoa, look at that. That's crazy. It did triple flats? That's insane. I click it a second time and it worked. Wow. I do remember someone had reported that before, but I don't think I'd ever seen it. Not sure what makes that happen, but there you go. That was a weird bug. But once I clicked it twice, it did actually update the ambatus to actually show me the range. This is telling me that top part, its highest note is F and its lowest note is A. So I'm now going to listen to this. Let's start. So I click the first measure. Here's my little trick. I select that measure and press escape. You can also click a note to start playback. But what you don't want to do is just select the measure. In MuseScore 4, what that'll do is solo that staff, and which is a great feature, and it's the way most audio programs work. If you select a single track, a sequencer or digital audio workstation, and then press play, usually it'll solo that track. It's kind of awkward to get used to in MuseScore if you're not used to it, but what I'm now in the habit of is selecting the measure and then pressing escape. That says start playback there, but go ahead and play all staves. Don't only play the top staff, because I want to hear this thing. Oh, that's way too slow. So, that's way too slow. So let's fix the tempo marking. The problem is that the tempo marking got added with a quarter note. Well, I don't want a quarter note. I want a half note. So, let's fix it. I'm going to double click. I think when I created the score, I actually had the option to choose half note, and I didn't notice it. I didn't deal with it. So it gave me the quarter note by default. I should have chosen half note. So I'm going to delete that quarter note. And now, over here in the Properties panel, you'll see the button that says Insert Special Characters. I'm going to go ahead and click that, and it pops up this little dialog that shows me, half note here. Half note. And so I can click that thing, and now I have a half note in my tempo marking, and in theory, it will now honor that. Notice this time I started the playback by clicking the time signature. That works too, as long as you don't have a range selection. Let's actually do the range selection. I'm going to select that first measure and press play. Notice it's only playing the top staff, right? That is the way it's designed to work, which is a useful feature when you know it's coming. But if you want to start playback somewhere and make sure it plays all staves, you can select that measure and then press escape. That's kind of my trick. So I'll start it over, and now we'll hear both staves. And let me zoom out a little bit. And there you go. So, yes, and Dave's absolutely right. You can also select multiple measures. So if I click that measure and shift-click that one, it'll play just those two staves. And that can be useful if you've got like a whole orchestra score and you just want to hear the woodwinds. Click the flute, shift-click the bassoon, and it gives you all the woodwinds, right? So as long as they're adjacent, that is a nice a feature where you can not just solo a single staff, but multiple adjacent staves. So yeah, the feature exists for a reason. People actually requested it very loudly, but it is annoying if you're not used to it. So that is how the piece sounds. So I think I got the notes in right, and I listen to the playback periodically to check my work. So I feel like I know the piece enough that I know it played it correctly. I don't know that I got the lyrics correct, and so I want to like proofread my lyrics. Oculus non v dash deet neck, O, and then Reese, O, D, and I'm butchering pronunciation, Vit. So the top line is good. Bottom line, oculus non vidit. And then neck, ek, oris. Oh, I'm in the wrong key. Divit. So that all looks good. Yeah. Marla's comment about the range things. Yeah, so this style here of showing this between the keys, the clef and the time signature is definitely used in some publications. But what's also very commonly used is a little floating measure off to the side here. And so people do that as well. You could certainly insert a measure yourself. So like I could take this staff here and insert a measure. Let me save it again. I'm going to insert a measure by pressing escape. And then I'm going to add a horizontal frame between these two. So I can select this measure here, and then, yeah, this guy doesn't really belong there anymore, but I'm not going to keep what I'm doing here. I don't even need the palettes. I keep forgetting that now you can add frames directly from, I have to make my window big enough to see the add button. So there's my add button, and measures, frames, insert horizontal frame. So now I've got, the real start of my piece and then a fake start of my piece, and I can therefore in this fake measure enter those notes as, say, brevs or whatever, and say that the lowest note is A, and then, Shift F to add the note above it. So this is how you can enter like a little fake, it's real. It's a real measure. And then you can manage this yourself to show the ranges that way. You could also then select that time signature and hide it, but then add the time signature here by selecting that measure and opening the time signatures palette and adding yourself 4-2. Is it under more? Yeah, there it is. 4-2. So you can do that, and then I could delete the existing images. So this is another way of creating those range indications that you'll sometimes see. But to me, I don't care enough about how they're presented to want to go through all that extra work. So I'm going to undo all that and just get back to what I started with here. Is that? Let me undo one more change. Yeah, I thought so. Notice I wanted to make sure I did the right number of changes. So redo to get back to that half note. So save it again, and I feel like again I've done what I needed to do here. And yeah, for harps, there's also, of course, the pedal diagrams and other things and set things that are harp-specific notation that we've discussed before. Do you normally show? This is sort of like a pedal diagram in principle. It tells you something that you don't actually play, but it tells you something about what you're going to do. And I don't know if that's how that came up, or if that helps you. I see. That would help you understand if this piece is playable on a given harp, because your harp might not have enough strings. That could well be. And so, yeah, knowing at the start of a harp piece what is the range of that harp piece is useful, so you know if you got to get a bigger harp. So that makes total sense. All right. So yes, I feel like we entered a bunch of music here, got some stuff done, got to see some features, and I hope you all found this useful. And tomorrow we'll just be back with some music. The range marking is called ambitus. It's A-M-B. It's like this. Ambitus. That's the thing. So let's play some music, and there you go. And so, yeah, Marla is also mentioning that you could just take a little screenshot and paste that screenshot in. I know people do that as well. That way you don't have to worry about it playing back or anything. So yeah, that's absolutely an option as well. So thanks everyone for being here. Thanks for the comments, questions, and keeping things interesting here. Tomorrow we'll be talking more about species counterpoint. I'll go look at some second and third, some fourth, maybe a little fifth species. But then, so that's what we'll be looking at are your exercises from the counterpoint course. And then next week we'll do a little bit of a project where you actually get to write something that feels like more than an exercise, that you get to really put some stuff into practice, and that's what we'll be working on next week. So I look forward to seeing you then, and hope you all have a good day, good week. See you later.